Welcome, everyone, to Stories Worth Hearing, where I get to interview women who are on a mission to create. Hi, I'm Denise Hansard, your host and life architect. And today, as always, I have a very special woman with us. And we met through a connection. We have only talked once, and it was like an immediate relationship. Wouldn't you say that?
Yep.
And then, it's like we just come full circle. It's like we're best friends. I mean, look at us. We're almost wearing the same colors and the same hair color. All we need is for her to have her hair curly or me to have mine straight today, but that's what it is. So let me introduce my guest to you today. This is Jorie Houlihan. And she gave me her bio, and I love how she wrote it. But she says she is sometimes sweary, a Gen X, ADHD, disco-loving wife to Jerry and mom to a teen and tween. She loves paddleboarding, doing ceramics, reading the Cubs, and dancing. And she's had a lot of twists and turns, as she puts it, in her career and her life. I mean, she started as an actress, which I can definitely see that. And then she went to a secretary and a bartender, a network marketer, a real estate agent, clinical massage therapy, and to what she does today, which is a life coach for women who discover their ADHD in adulthood. So, Jorie, welcome.
Thank
Great.
you for having me.
Yay, definitely. As we said, guys, and I told you, I mean, Jorie, it was that immediate connection through a very good
Yes.
friend of ours. And
Yes.
I got to say, everybody, don't dismiss when someone says, "Oh, you need to meet so and so," because it's always meant to be. And that's how I felt with this. So let's
Yes.
get into it. Jorie, you had an event in your life. You've done a lot. You said, actress, secretary, bartender, which you said all of those, fed into your actress days, etc., which I love. And at the same time, at a later stage in your life, you had one event that impacted you immensely. So I'd just like for you to tell your story so everyone can hear it.
Sure.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, I have had a number of careers in my life. And when I got into my 40s, I found myself really depressed. And I kept looking at my life and thinking, is this really all I'm capable of? I mean, I love my husband and my kids. I just always thought I would do more with my life. And I was actually in the middle of taking a personal development course. And one of the things that we had to do in that course was we had to kind of narrow down a number of goals. And the goal that I chose that was going to impact the most things in my life was I wanted more self-discipline. And I thought everything in my life I'm unhappy with because I don't have discipline. I just need to master self-discipline. And so I was like, I am mastering self-discipline.
Okay, I have to pause you for just a minute. And I love
Okay.
that. I love how you got up into your mind and said, discipline, discipline, control, control, because that's exactly what you felt you needed. And yet, tell me what you were feeling on the inside.
I I was so I felt like I was lazy and I just needed to work harder. And I kept thinking, why am I self-sabotaging myself? And I honestly just didn't think I was very smart. And was it was just really starting to take its toll. It had been taking its toll. I just was starting to really recognize it, I think, at that point. And
So you took
and I sort of revisited the idea of ADHD, ironically, because of TikTok. Um, and it wasn't the obvious signs of ADHD, right? It wasn't the obvious, I lose things a lot and I'm easily distracted. It was things like out of sight, out of mind, right? Where like, if we don't see it, we forget it exists. And it included people. And I was like, oh my gosh, that would explain a lot. And there were just so many other things that are just not always so well known with ADHD. And I thought, well, this makes a lot of sense, but I'm not self-diagnosing myself from TikTok videos. And one day I was talking actually with the friend who introduced us. And I don't remember what happened, but I said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I think I have ADHD." And she said, "Actually, I think you do.
Mm,
And I think it's why you struggle so much. And I think you're always going to flounder until you get this figured out." And
yeah.
the word flounder hit me so hard because that's what it felt like my entire life was. I was just floundering from
Mm,
one thing to another, just trying to find something that would stick.
yeah.
And
Even probably that course you decided to take.
yeah, yeah, I was always taking personal development courses, trying to figure out what was wrong with me, right? And trying to get better at discipline. And maybe this will be the thing that will get me organized. And maybe this will get me the thing that will help me initiate projects or follow through on them. And I was always looking for some other thing outside of myself that was going to help me with this. And I didn't realize that it was that my brain just works differently. And so all of these things that I was learning, they are all great information. They just don't necessarily work for my brain. But I didn't know that at the time. So I just thought, oh, I must not get it. I don't adult very well. I just must be dumb. And so the friend of ours convinced me to get assessed. Now, I was really nervous about it because the first time I brought up ADHD with a doctor, I was 19.
Mm,
And I didn't call it ADHD specifically because I didn't really know what it was. I just knew something was not right.
yeah.
And I was dismissed and was just told, well, you're in college now. And I was like, oh, okay. And over the years, I probably brought it up another like 3 or 4 times. And, but I was always at the doctor for something else. And they'd say, so is there anything else you want to mention? And I'd be like, well, yeah. And every time I was dismissed, like, yeah, you're fine. And
Yeah, it's like I remember you telling me you'd say, they'd look at me Denise and go, well, you have a child now. Of course, you're going to feel these ways. You're a mother now. You got way too much going on.
yeah, it
You
was always,
expect.
well, you have too much on your plate. You have this, you have that.
Mhm.
And I try to be fair about it, right? Like, so the first time when I was 19, back then, they didn't really think it happened with girls. It was all adolescent boys, right?
Mhm.
So I try to be fair about what knowledge was had at that time. But if this keeps coming up, you would think somebody would start paying attention. So it didn't. And so anyway, so I was really nervous about getting assessed. And then I ended up, it was during the kind of the earlier part of the pandemic, and we couldn't get in to see anybody anyway. And I started seeing things for online companies that were doing assessments and therapy. And so I thought, well, let me look into that. And so I found one that got great reviews. And they didn't at that time do medication in my state. So I thought, okay, so there's not an incentive for them to diagnose me with this because they won't make any money off of me after this, right? And so so I went through that assessment, and I was then finally diagnosed with ADHD combined type.
Mm,
And on one hand, it was like a big relief, right? Like, okay, I'm not really lazy. I'm not dumb. I'm not whatever. It was like, oh my gosh, this makes so much of my life make sense. But then I also found myself feeling really lost,
mm,
and I was really angry, and I was grieving for this. It was really hard to not do the what might have beens, right?
yeah.
If they had assessed me when I was 19 and I had been given all the tools that I have available to me now, things might have looked a lot different in my life. Life might have not have been so hard.
Yeah.
Um, I wouldn't have tortured myself the way I did. But I was my own worst bully.
Mhm.
Um, and but then I would remind myself that I may not have ended up with my husband and therefore my kids. So, I kind of like them and I want to keep them around. So I'm okay with it. Um,
And yet at
but
the same time, it's and probably a lot of your viewers can relate to this on maybe not ADHD, but other areas of your life where you have beat yourself up. And we recognize, or we want to get to that point where we stop that with the
mhm,
criticism and the defeatism and really, however it looks in our life, and recognize that, you know what, I've done the best that I could at the time that it was, and this is part of my journey. And
Yep.
then if you need a moment to curse the universe for going on this journey, then go ahead, but then come back and move forward. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And that was something that I realized. One of my friends said, maybe you had to go through what you went through to prepare you for what's next for you. And I think she knew before I did what I was going to end up doing for a living. But I was just like, yeah, I've always had this mindset of everything happens for a reason. There are no accidents. But I had to go through that grief and recognize that, like you just said, I did do the best that I could. I spent my whole life thinking I always had to work harder.
Yeah.
And now I was realizing I work like 5 times harder than everybody else just to keep my head above water. I just need to work smarter and differently now that so to do that, I really need to understand how my brain works. And so that is when I really started to pay attention to what my narratives were, because even though I logically knew I wasn't lazy, I wasn't stupid, I realized that those narratives were still driving the bus,
Mm.
and having to be much more aware of that, learning all I could about different tools and hacks and tips to try and make certain things easier in my life, realizing how well I had done in my life, actually, considering how bad my executive functioning is. I have all kinds of I realize I'm a really creative problem solver. And I'm sure completely because of living with ADHD for so long. So, but it was important for me to really kind of go through that whole process. I think, one of the things that I realized was I'm still me. I'm just now realizing that I come with ADHD, and I just had been explaining it a different way my whole life. So
Mhm.
now that I understand what it is, now I am responsible for, because I believe ADHD is an explanation. It's not an excuse.
Right.
Um, and but we do live in a world right now that still there's a lot of people who still believe that ADHD is just an excuse, that it's really just you're lazy and you don't want to do the things. And
Mm.
because it's an invisible disability, you can't see it, you can't see what's going on in my brain to understand. And
Yeah, it's
um
silent symptoms.
yeah, and even my husband, when I was first diagnosed, he's like, "You don't have that." And I was like, yeah, I do." And then as he started to learn more, he started to go, "Oh yeah, no, never mind. Yeah, you totally have this." So,
And
uh,
with this, I know we talked about how learning this and you recognize, I surround my people with that are similar to me. And we all find that we do that because I think it's a
yeah,
way to be able to connect.
yeah, we tend to find our own people, so to speak. And so I think for a lot of people with ADHD, they go, "Well, my friend does it. My friend does this and they don't have ADHD." Well, they may actually have ADHD. They just don't know it yet, So, I recently found out that a couple people that I hung out with a lot in my 20s have ADHD. Had no idea back then that they did. And I'm
Yeah.
sure I was comparing myself to them and going, "See, I do the same thing that they do. We're fine." Um, and and some people are able to, they have been able to create really great coping mechanisms that, so they're, when they finally do get assessed at a later age, they're kind of fine. It's just for them more now I just want to have the validation that I'm right about this.
Yeah.
But for me, it was not that. Like, I just was like, I cannot keep living the way I'm living. And so, I introduced myself to, when I was initially diagnosed, let me go back a little bit. When I was initially diagnosed, I thought, now that I know what this is, I can totally handle this on my own. I don't need therapy. I don't need coaching. I don't need medication. I can do this all on my own. And about 3 or 4 months later, our mutual friend calls me and she was like, right out of the gate, "You haven't started meds yet, have you?" And I was like, and if you guys knew this woman, she's the best. I love her because she does not mince words. You know
Exactly.
exactly what she's thinking. And I was sort of like, is it that obvious? And she's like, like, and
Yeah.
she's like, I don't think you'll need a lot, but I do think it's going to help you.
Mhm.
And just try it. And if it doesn't work, then you'll know. And so that was a struggle for me because I had really tried to live very naturally using natural alternatives, things like that. And nothing that I had ever found over the years had really worked well enough. And I just thought, all right, you know what? There's literally nothing else I can try except this. So let me do it. And it was a game changer for me. But it's a tool. Like it doesn't cure ADHD.
Mhm.
Um, what I tell people is it takes my brain from like dumpster fire anarchy, right? Like I'm running around constantly putting out fires in my head that I'm pretty sure I started, to more of a well-run three-ring circus. So there's still a lot going on up there, but
Mhm.
it feels manageable. I don't get as overwhelmed by it. And my anxiety went down, my depression went away. Like it was unbelievable what that did, in addition to also working through a lot of this stuff with my therapist and, working with coaching for the day to day of it.
Mhm.
It really just made a huge difference in my life.
Is that having done all of that, and thank you for sharing this because I know it
Mhm.
can be quite emotional and
Mhm.
feeling, but thank you. Um, is that why you decided to become the life coach? To move it, let me reframe that. To finally hear the universe and move into your gift of life coaching with the specific silent disease that we have.
Yeah, it was. I put it off for a long time because I thought, well, do I really want to be dealing with this 24/7 and blah blah blah? And then I'm like, I'm already dealing with it 24/7 because I live with it. And I just kept meeting so many women. The biggest problem I had, honestly, was finding therapy and coaching and any kind of real support for women my age being diagnosed with this. It just really was not, I really had to work hard. And for people with executive dysfunction, that's incredibly difficult to do.
Mhm.
And and so I just said, "Well, okay, well, you know what? If I can't find what I need, I'm just going to create something myself, basically." And so I decided to move into that niche, so to speak,
Mhm.
because I was meeting other women that were feeling the same way. They're like, I've been diagnosed, but I don't know what to do with this. Like, there's nobody, like, they're like, okay, there you go. There's your diagnosis, off you go. And, some people had a therapist, but even with that, there's a lot of therapists that don't really have a good working knowledge of ADHD.
Mhm.
And so they don't really know how to approach the day-to-day aspects of it. They can certainly help with the emotional aspects of a lot of it, right? The grief and the anger and all that stuff that we have when we're first diagnosed, if we go down that road, but they can't really help with the day-to-day. And that's where a lot of the coaching comes into play. I actually think coaching with therapy is a really good combination
I agree
because the
with you.
therapy can work with all the stuff from the past,
Mhm.
and the coach can work with the day-to-day aspect of now and moving forward, and really helping you to sort of embody that person that you now know you are capable of being.
Mhm.
You just have to learn how your brain works specifically, and it's so unique to every person. There's not a one size fits all answer.
Yeah. That's beautiful. So I want to tie this up.
Mhm.
Um, this is wonderful. I love your story, and this is why I wanted to interview you for our stories worth hearing. So, is there one thing that you want to leave people with?
If you are thinking that you may have this, if it is financially feasible for you, get
Mhm.
assessed. Get the answers that you need. Don't listen to what people around you are saying. If they're saying, "Oh, that's not a real thing," or whatever, just get assessed. It's because if you don't have it, then you'll know.
Yeah.
And if you do have it, then you're going to have access to the tools that will help you start really like thriving in your life. And that is what I really want, is for women to start really thriving and living up to their full potential in a way that they couldn't before.
Thank you. Now, this is just Wonderful. And guys, I want to say thank you for listening. And I'm going to put all of Jorie's information down in the description box. So that way you can connect with her if it's something you want to do. And I mean, her Instagram, she's on Instagram, she's on TikTok, which I think is fabulous. YouTube, and it's JorieHoulihan. And you just put .com after that, and that's their website, and you can learn more. So Jorie, thank you. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Most definitely. So guys, this is Stories Worth Hearing. Please like, share, and subscribe, and can't wait to see you until next time.